Round 10 of the US Championships 2015 saw the clash between the two top players, Hikaru Nakamura and Ray Robson, could decide the tournament. Unfortunately, this game did not live up to expectations. Ray Robson, with the white pieces, played a very solid opening, really not risking too much, and neither player had any difficulties. This is a position after 30 moves, and Nakamura played a very nice simplifying move. There's only one danger here, that white manages to blockade with his knight on this square, and somehow black has a bad bishop. But here Nakamura played an excellent move, d4, and this simplifies to a drawn endgame. In fact, here they agreed to draw. The game might have continued like this, and you can see that there's not a lot to play for in this position. So that left the standings just the same. Nakamura half point ahead of Robson going to the last round. More on that later. Let's take a look at a couple of other games from round 10. Akobian against Naroditsky. Of course, Varajan Akobian involved in this extraordinary forfeit from round 9. Let's see how he got on in round 10. Well, he sacrificed a pawn in the opening, playing a very bold system with white, and he has very good compensation for the pawn. Nice centre, beautifully centralised rooks, all his pieces very harmoniously placed. Now the only thing is that how do you break through black's solid shell? You might consider c4 here, but then the knight does land on this very nice square b4. I like Akobian's decision here. He played h4, so he can't see immediately how to improve the rest of his position, but h4, I love this h pawn attack. It's one of my favourite attacking methods. Why? Because it doesn't compromise white's king position, but this little pawn push can just create a weakness in the enemy king position, and that might be enough to tip black over. Let's take a look. Bishop d7 from Naroditsky. Now here's an interesting moment. One might imagine that white would push on, but not exactly clear how white continues from there. I mean, one could possibly try this position. You could push on with c4 again, but now perhaps we see the idea of one of the ideas of bishop d7. That's to play queen e8 and target that a pawn. Now that a pawn in itself is not a big deal, but once that bishop gets there, then obviously it's hitting some lumps. So Akobian played, to my eyes, first glance, a very strange move, rook a1, pulling the rook away from the centre. Actually, I think it's an excellent move. It just holds things together. There are also potential tactics with taking here and knight takes c3 as well. So it rules out any nasty hits. Now, Naroditsky played an interesting move, bishop c6 in this position. He might have tried queen c8. The other thing is that, having protected the a-pawn, perhaps white's queen might be greedy and go for this at some point. Of course, you have to watch out for this pawn, but it's another consideration. Naroditsky tried bishop c6. I think this is an attempt to gain some freedom for his pieces. Obviously the bishop is on a nice diagonal now, but he's leaving this pawn on prise. Akobian could have taken this. This is not a bad idea, but you can see that black has more freedom for his pieces. I still prefer white's position there, but black is definitely in the game, and particularly you can see the queen and bishop lined up against that a-pawn. So Akobian resisted the temptation to take that pawn and instead pushed on with his h-pawn. Well, I like this. Here there's a difference. If black tries g5 to close the position, now you can take that, because after queen d7 you can see the f5 square is available, and that is rather unpleasant for black. So here, unfortunately, g5 not possible. Naroditsky tried queen e8, looking at that a pawn. Perhaps he has ideas to play knight b6. But now Akobian played very boldly. So first of all, he takes on g6, and you can see that that pawn is rather weak. Black's king position just looks a little bit more vulnerable. c4, and here Akobian powers through the middle of the board. Obviously there's a pin on the e-file, so that pawn can't be taken. But bishop takes a4. Now it starts to get tactical. Now black can get away with this because this bishop is loose, but look what happens. Knight d3. Here white could play rook takes e6, but after this black would transpose into an endgame where he has pretty decent drawing chances. But again, Akobian played far more boldly than that. He sacrificed the exchange. He took the knight on d3, so that allows the queen to take the rook. But here he has superb compensation for the exchange. So he's a rook for knight down, but look at that powerful passed e-pawn, and the queen is turning towards the king side. Or you can see white's pieces are massed in that sector of the board, and black's queen for the moment is offside. So there's a threat to take this g6 pawn by the queen. Naroditsky played f5 here. I think he should have tried king h7, even though, I mean, this is a tough defensive task. But I think after f5, this weakened these squares. And, well, the way Akobian won this game was, well, it's a tour de force, really. It's all about central control. If you have a look what happens. So, first of all, Akobian secures that e-pawn, and, well, I think every picture tells a story. Look, white completely dominates the centre. It's fantastic, and that means that he has the freedom to turn to the king side, and black simply can't connect with the king side. Well, this is a last forlorn hope, trying to advance this a-pawn, but it's just too slow. Rook e3, well, it's the classic rook lift. Of course, once the rook hits the h-file, that will spell the end for black's king, and there's no real defence to that. This is just desperation. Well, Naroditsky tried to cover this, but queen f7 is absolutely hopeless. And here, after rook f4, the only way to prevent disaster with rook h4 is to give up the queen, and that's obviously absolutely hopeless. So, very powerful victory from Varadjan Akobian. Clearly, he wasn't affected by yesterday's little drama. What about Wesley So? I have to say, I do feel very sorry for him and what's happened, not just with his forfeit yesterday, but with family difficulties apparently during the tournament. He faced Kamsky. That said, I should say I completely agree with the arbiter's decision. I don't think he had any alternative. Anyway, I'll leave that for the time being. Wesley So with the black pieces playing at Kamsky. Now, Wesley grabbed the two bishops at the start of the game, very near the start of the game, but he's had to suffer a bit. Kamsky has some initiative on the king side. That bishop blocking out the threat to g7, but it's not a beautiful square. And Wesley under some pressure here. Let's take a look. a5, but just one open file, and well, at least you can see that Wesley's position is pretty well coordinated, and Kamsky, well, he's still trying to find a way through on the king side. Maybe he's considering sacrifices here, but here the fight back starts. Queen e4 is an excellent move. Well, I've been talking about centralization in this game, in this report I should say, and this is another fine example of centralization. That queen controls so many important squares, prevents that knight moving obviously because of the pin, and it dominates the board, and I think from this moment on the game changes. So the queen dropped back, bishop e7, so keeps that bishop, and now these knights look in a bit of a tangle. Queen b5, hitting the knight, but that knight just drops back and everything is protected, everything's safe. And now, yeah, white has a slight problem here. Those knights. I mean, soon there's going to be a threat to play g6 just to win that knight on h5. This is a problem. Queen d3. And here, this is a brave decision from Wesley. If he wanted a draw, then he could just exchange queens here. And I don't see that black has any particular difficulties. Incidentally, that creates a retreat route for the knight. This would probably be a draw, but I think it shows great character from Wesley that he played this position on. He played Queen b7. Now, okay, the Queen has had to retreat from this excellent central square, but it reinstates this threat of g6 winning the knight, and white has problems. So first of all, Kamsky put the knight back here, so giving the knight a square on f4, but then e5 closes off that route, and black now has the initiative. So again, g6 threatened, and the only move that Kamsky could find to prevent g6 was g4, but that leaves that h-pawn very weak. Still, this is brave of Wesley's play in this way, because you could say his king is still a little bit vulnerable, this knight on h5, but he had it all under control. He'd worked it out very well. Here the queen looks very threatening, but Wesley just played bishop takes h4. Very cool. Obviously white cannot get that pawn back because there's a deadly check on f3. So after bishop takes h4, actually this was a clear and clean extra pawn for black. Now, white still has activity here, and takes a lot of effort to realise the pawn advantage, but Wesley managed to do it some 20 moves later. Well, 30 moves later actually, he managed to win. An excellent comeback from Wesley So, and he now has 5.5 out of 10 going into the final round. Incidentally, after the game, Wesley was interviewed. He agreed to an interview. He said, "This tournament has been a nightmare for me. I just can't wait for it to be finished." Very tough. He also said that he simply didn't realise that in writing him these little words of encouragement to himself on a separate piece of paper, he didn't realise he was breaking the rules. I mean, I think he was being very naive in that respect. Anyway, I feel very sorry for him. So, one round to go, and Nakamura leads with 7 out of 10. Ray Robson has 6.5. Onishuk has 6. Now, last round pairings, interesting. Nakamura plays Onishuk with the white pieces, and Robson plays black against Gareev. Now, Gareev is a wild player, so anything could happen in that game, and Nakamura faces Onishuk, who's a very solid player. So Ray Robson still has a chance to win the tournament. So look out for my report on the final round of the US Championship coming up tomorrow.